The defense calls Nicole Mitchell.
Raise your right hand, please.
Do you swear the testimony you give here will be true? If so, say I do.
All right, please take a seat in the witness stand, and you've heard me give other witnesses warnings. There is a slight incline, so watch your step. Mr. DeCray.
Before I begin, I'm going to give the same statement I gave to the first witness. Please be careful with the microphone and do your best to use first and last names, and I will do the same. Ms. Mitchell, will you please state your full name for the record?
Nicole Lynn Mitchell.
What is your date of birth?
October 10th of 1974.
Making you how old?
50.
Before we talk about this case, I'd like to briefly talk about your life and your background. Where do you live?
Woodbury, Minnesota.
And for those who may not know, is that a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Just east of St. Paul.
Who are the members of your household?
Myself, and I have 2 sons, both age 8, Sam and Liam.
Are they twins?
No, Sam is my biological son, and Liam first came to me respite foster care when he was a little over 3.5, permanently when he was 4, and then I adopted him 2 years later. They're a month apart.
I'm going to have you move the mic up a little bit and get it back a little bit just so we avoid, perfect.
Okay.
It'll pick you up. Are you a single parent?
I am.
You mentioned Liam started out as a foster child. Have you fostered any other children?
Yes, predominantly respite care. Either regular kids that would come 1 week in a month, usually children with disabilities, or emergency placements. And then I had one other full-time foster placement, a baby that I had for 2 years, that left my family in 2023, but I still get to see him sometimes.
I think we're going to be talking for a while, so I'm going to encourage you one more time. I know, but if you can just stay back a little bit.
Oh, back. Okay.
Yep, it'll pick you up. Look how far back I am. It'll definitely pick you up. What do you do for work?
Currently, I'm a state senator.
How long have you been in the Minnesota Senate?
2.5 years.
Can you tell us briefly about your prior employment?
Yes. So most of my career has been meteorologist, weather. I joined the National Guard when I was 17, and about half of that career as a hurricane hunter. And most recently, since 2019 until this past November, I had been a commander, also still weather, in the National Guard. I retired because I was eligible, but also because of this case. And then civilian meteorologist, usually for TV, radio, things like that.
Do you also have a law degree?
I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about your legal career?
Well, I wouldn't use the word career. It was just something that interested me at the time. I was doing a lot of children's advocacy, and thought it would be nice to have. So I never really practiced other than a very brief volunteer stint. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Until this case, had you had any experience with the criminal law?
No, in law school, I always joke that it was, I took the touchy-feelies. So like family law, domestic violence, juvenile justice, things that I cared about. I had like one basic criminal case we had to, or class that we were required to take. So I took that maybe 20 years ago. And the Senate is the same way. We tend to kind of work in our areas that we have more experience in. So I do a lot of work for children's issues and veterans issues.
How long have you known your stepmother, Carol Mitchell?
They started dating when I was 4 and got married when I was 8. So 46 years.
Growing up, did you live with Carol and Rod Mitchell or with your mother?
There was a brief stint where my mom was in the military, and Dad technically had me, although I was mostly at my grandma's for school and stuff. But otherwise, it was always with my mom, and then Dad and Carol were more like summers and holidays, things like that.
Did Carol Mitchell ever legally adopt you?
No.
It's an issue in this case that Carol Mitchell has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and some witnesses have already told the jury that their relationships with Carol have been affected by her Alzheimer's. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely.
I know it's hard to condense a long family relationship into somewhat of a short summary, but how would you summarize your relationship with Carol Mitchell pre-Alzheimer's?
I mean, she was one of my parents, and my mom, especially when I was younger, was a single mom and working and dating, and like I eventually did, she had joined the Guard to help herself go back to school. So it was, and I always remember Carol being in my life and as a mother figure, and so it was nice to have another mother figure.
What about childhood memories that you have with Carol Mitchell and Rod Mitchell? Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, my mom hates camping, and they like it, so, I'd get to do things that I wouldn't do. It was here in DL, so trips to the beach, Zorbas, a few trips, like to the Black Hills, just, normal family stuff.
You mentioned that Carol was like a second mother. What was your favorite things about Carol?
She loves animals. She will tell you all day long about her cats. And I think not to that extent. I mean, she won't even kill a spider. But I think I got my respect for animals in part because of that. She's very artistic, which is not how my brain works at all. So I was always kind of impressed by some of the things that she could come up with and do. She was very much her own person. Like, she didn't really care what other people thought, which I kind of respect. Like, if it was what she believed in or she wanted, like, she was kind of, fearless in that way.
Did things change between you and your family and Carol Mitchell when your son Liam joined the family in about 2011?
Yeah. Carol was pretty meticulous and was always kind of just so. And so kids in her space was always, and Liam came from a background with trauma, and he'd already, before he came to me full time, he'd already been bounced through another foster home, and he's the sweetest kid, but he could get pretty emotional sometimes, even more than at the time a normal 4-year-old. And we didn't have the diagnosis yet, but he does have some trauma-related diagnosis, anxiety, ADHD, and autism. So when he gets excited, sometimes he'll, flap a little, or it's called stimming, where he wants to rub against things. And it just, it unsettled her. So we'd been staying at the house a fair amount since Sam was born. In general, but in 2019, so a couple years before that, I'd gotten a job where I could work remotely. So then we'd stay more, and she'd even made Sam his own like really cute room in the house. And when Liam joined, she pretty much said we were still invited, but he couldn't stay at the house. And I couldn't do that, so we had to quit staying. I started staying at Nancy's when I'd come to visit instead.
And I might have misspoke in my question. What year did Liam come into your family? I said 2011.
I didn't catch it. He, full-time, he came in 2021. I'm so sorry.
Okay, thank you. When did you first notice signs of Alzheimer's in Carol Mitchell?
I'm pretty sure it was 2020, because I think it was summer, and obviously by 2021, we'd quit staying at the house. So it'd been one of the visits where we were staying, and Dad was going to the grocery store. He asked all of us if we needed anything from the grocery store, and then left. And a few minutes later, Carol was just looking around really confused. And, I was like, are you missing some? Do you need some? I just checked in to see like what it was. And she was like, oh, I was just looking for your dad. Have you seen him anywhere? And I said, yeah, he went to the grocery store. And she's like, I don't think so. And she literally didn't remember the conversation, that he'd asked us all what we wanted. It just wasn't there.
Did you talk to your dad about this incident?
Yeah, when he got home, it was just a quick trip. When he got back, I pulled him aside and mentioned it to him. And he was kind of one of those stoic guys that, didn't burden you with his problems usually, and sometimes you couldn't get him to talk about things. And he just said, oh, I got it, don't worry about it.
Do you know when Carol Mitchell was formally diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
It was sometime, I'm pretty sure, in 2021. Or, I'm sorry, 2020. I believe the testing started in 2021, and then I think the diagnosis came in 2022.
What kind of things did you begin to notice after you learned of Carol Mitchell's formal diagnosis?
Well, I guess I don't remember which, some of it was before the formal
Sure.
diagnosis. So 2021 was a busy year because Liam joined the family in April, and then they were still coming to visit me, or us, at my house, because we all did a lot of visits back and forth. And then I'm not sure how they all talked me into it. We also had 3 foster dogs that year, and then I took on a foster baby in August. So I don't think I was paying as much attention as I probably should have been. But the things I noticed were Carol was usually the driver, and Dad was driving a little bit more. She had been staying at the house too when she came along when they came to visit. And by the end of the year, she was convinced one of her cats couldn't be left overnight. And so she quit coming on the visits. Those are the two. Well, just in general, a little shorter, I guess.
Was there a specific incident your dad visited you in Woodbury without Carol Mitchell?
So just in general, you know, so even when she quit visiting because of the cats, he was still coming to visit, typically about once a month. And sometimes it was never like a week or something, but sometimes it would be 3 days or, he did start, I mean, he would always check in and call and stuff and visit with her when he was at my house, but it felt like he was a little more like, I gotta check in, things like that. And, he got more consistent that the visits could only be like 2 days. Like he didn't want to be gone for more than 2 days. And if it started getting, you know, he just seemed more anxious to get home.
Can you recall a specific incident where he was anxious to get home?
The one I remember the most is, so in early 2023, he'd come in actually for it was my swearing in. And so he was coming in for 2 days for that. I think just before that, there'd been a woman that had gotten lost in Detroit Lakes with dementia, like a pretty serious case where they almost didn't find the person in time. We talked about it, and because it had made statewide news. And that visit in particular, the one right after we'd had all that conversation, I'd asked him if he could just like stay the next day because my babysitter wasn't available until I got home from work, and then go home. And there ended up being a bad snowstorm. And so I got home a little late, and I was like, Dad, it's too bad to drive. And he was like, no, I got to get home. And he literally, I don't think it was technically a blizzard, but it was awful. And he left at like 8:00 at night to drive back to Detroit Lakes.
Did he make it?
He did not. He had to turn around after 15 or 20 minutes. And then he left immediately the next morning.
What did you take from this incident?
My dad's was a pretty laid back guy. And he didn't at least like to show his family he was worrying. And so, you know, if Dad was worried and was showing it, it was usually a sign it was pretty bad.
Do you have any other relatives with Alzheimer's?
Yes, my grandfather had it pretty seriously, and my mom now also is starting to have, it hasn't been diagnosed as full Alzheimer's yet, but dementia.
Can you talk a little bit about your grandfather's Alzheimer's that you remember?
Yeah, it was pretty sad. As he deteriorated, he was getting lost a lot. He thought people were stealing electricity from his house. He kind of lost his best friend because he had a watch that he thought his friend had stolen, and even when you would show him the watch, he would immediately forget it and think this, and like if you saw his friend, that was the first thing he'd do, is just be like, you stole my watch. And he forgot my grandmother by the end. And the hardest thing was that he couldn't go to the bathroom by himself even, because there were a couple times he'd gotten into his feces.
You mentioned that your biological mother is either in the early stages or does have Alzheimer's. Are you doing any caregiving for her?
Fortunately, she's got my stepdad there. And my sisters and I check in. I was doing a little bit more last summer, not so much because of the Alzheimer's, but she's also having some medical problems. So she had a knee surgery, and then during rehab, she fell and broke her back. So there were a couple times my stepdad got overwhelmed, and I'd have to call, or he'd call me, and I'd have to rush over to help him.
How about Carol Mitchell? To your knowledge, does she have any relatives with Alzheimer's?
Yes, one of her parents had Alzheimer's. Her oldest sister, Gigi, who's in her late 80s, and she has it to the point that Carol had told me in June of 2023 that her son lives with her, and she doesn't remember her son. I think she told Carol on the phone, there's just this nice young man that lives in my house. And then her brother Lee had it, I think, pretty seriously, and was in a nursing home and passed during COVID.
Carol Mitchell has a son named Jon Keel. What is your relationship like with him?
I didn't know him that well. It was friendly when we would see each other.
How often did you see each other, to the best of your recollection?
Well, they reunited in 2003, but I was living out of state for work, and didn't move back to state until 2016. So we would have met in probably, I would say sometime in the first half of 2017, because we all went out to dinner together, and I brought Sam with, and I remember them bringing a little baby gift for Sam.
Did you ever talk to Jon Keel about Carol Mitchell's Alzheimer's?
Yes. After Dad passed, and I was really concerned. One of the things that she had said was, besides grief and that she was depressed.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Was that being in the house with all the reminders of Dad was just really hard. And so I thought maybe getting her out of the house for a weekend would be a really good idea. And I had relatives coming down for Memorial Day on their own trip, but they said they'd be willing to bring her with. And I thought just getting out of the house and maybe going out and doing other things and a change of scenery would be really beneficial. So I'd called Jonathan to say, maybe if I could get her to come down, we could all go out to dinner. She'd really like that. If there's anything you can do to help me kind of convince her to do that, I would appreciate it.
And did you text with Mr. Keel about this?
So I think we showed it yesterday. We talked about the Alzheimer's paranoia during that conversation, and if I recall the text correctly, it was kind of a follow-up to that, saying that he had tried to talk to her and what he was doing when she was getting paranoid.
Was there an incident related to Jon Keel and Carol Mitchell at your dad's funeral?
Yes. We were all pretty in shock. But there was a point where we were both there, and she introduced us to each other. And of course, after we all met, I would say we all went out to dinner together, kind of at least once, lunch or dinner, at least once a year. So by that point, we'd all met together several times, and I was just concerned that, she was that out of it.
Historically, do you feel that Jonathan Keel knows Carol Mitchell as well as you?
I don't think so.
Why do you say that?
It's just different. She gave him up for adoption right before she turned 20, I think. And then they didn't reunite until he was in his 30s and she and Dad were in their 50s. And there was definitely love, and she was thankful for the reunion. But it's different when a kid's growing up with you and knows all the family stories and, all that history of.
I think her mic went out there, Your Honor. I don't know if it got touched or not, but
Attempt
Is
to
it-
tap. There we go. I
Okay.
think she turned her face away from the microphone, so.
we're having trouble with that microphone. We're going to work on that. I think you were talking about the things that you learned about Carol Mitchell when you were growing up.
Oh, yes, thank you. So that just like history of having a parent your whole life versus someone even that you love very much that you've met in your 30s. And so, I can name every cat she's ever had. Why she got divorced from her first husband, all the kind of family history, most of her medical stuff, even before the Alzheimer's, just history.
Did Carol Mitchell ever say anything to you that led you to believe that she agreed with your assessment?
It was just little things. Again, it wasn't a difference in love. It was just kind of like I was the kid who was expected to do the stuff, and Jonathan was in a different category where he just wasn't expected to be that person. So, for example, October of 2023, I'd been in town for a business trip, and I kind of took her on with me. We went on basically a little road trip up to, I think the town's called Callaway. And on the way back, we passed the cemetery, and she said, that's the cemetery, that's where it is. There's going to be fees on it after I croak. You need to take care of that because it wouldn't be fair to ask Jonathan. And just kind of things like that she didn't kind of ever ask him to do, like the stuff. I don't know how to explain that.
What about Pam Muxfeld, Carol Mitchell's niece, power of attorney? She testified earlier in the trial. What's your relationship like with her?
So that was her side of the family. And when I was younger, we would occasionally spend some holidays there. Pam was a little bit older than me, so I would say 8 or 10 years. I actually knew her sister Lisa a little bit better, who was slightly younger. So Lisa had gone on some of the camping trips and stuff with us. So I just, other than a couple holidays. And then there was a big falling out in the family, and mostly with Pam's mom, Dee, and Carol. So then they quit going to holidays.
Just try to use
I'm
last
sorry.
name. It's okay.
Oh,
hard.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Pam Muxfeld, Dee Muxfeld, Carol Mitchell. Anyway, so then, do I have to say Rod Mitchell?
You can say your dad, I think.
So then Dad and Carol Mitchell quit going to holidays there, which meant I quit going to holidays there, and all the holidays were at the Mitchells after that. So then I hadn't ever seen them again until the funeral.
Did you talk to Pam Muxfeld sometime after your dad's funeral?
Yeah. So Carol was kind of cycling through people. I hadn't been able to be there right after the funeral because I was in a really busy time of work, and I felt really bad. And I was grateful. I communicated a lot with my aunts and Carol, and was grateful they were stepping up to help. But then she started cycling through people that she trusted. And then it seemed like she was maybe going to name Pam for some of this stuff, which was totally fine. But I just knew they hadn't been around her as much. And especially with Carol, the one thing I see that is different from some of the other family members is that I think she kind of masks it well. Like, she'll get something in her head, and even if it's 100% incorrect, she will say it with such conviction that unless you know. So it had been hard for the rest of the family to even tell, even my side of the family. And so I kind of wanted to explain that to Pam, like, that I was really concerned, and if she was taking on that role, that I thought we needed to be working with Carol to understand what her wishes were going to be. Because I wasn't sure how long she would be able to stay living on her own. She was starting to get lost. Just other things that I thought we needed to work with Carol to know her wishes while she still was having, some really good days, so that we weren't doing anything down the road that weren't actually her wishes. And I just wanted her to kind of know that.
What was Pam's response, Pam Muxfeld's response?
She said that she'd had another relative with Alzheimer's, and she knew all about it, and like basically she had it. And working with foster kids, I have to work collaboratively a lot of times with families, and I was kind of hoping that's what we could all do. I felt a little like my concerns were dismissed.
Did she say whether they had a plan if Carol would end up not being able to live on her own anymore?
Yes, she said that if she needed, so what I had wanted, and I think I maybe communicated this, is, there were a bunch of relatives in Moorhead if she ended up somewhere that would check in on her all the time. Or maybe she wanted to stay in Detroit Lakes because she still had some friends in the area. Or maybe she wanted to go to Fergus Falls. Or maybe she wanted to end up, like, if she was near me in Woodbury, we would check on her all the time, and Jonathan would be near. Like, I didn't know what she wanted, and I wanted to honor what she wanted. And so when I said, we should just figure out what she wants, she said, oh, my mom will just take care of her. I'm sorry, D. Muxfeld, or no, D. Lindholm.
What did you think about that plan?
I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't say what was in my head, but that was a horrible plan.
Why?
The two of them were like oil and water. Even when we would do holidays, we'd get home and it would just be a vent about little slights or things like that had happened. And then the big fights had happened like 20 years ago, but there was a fight over reunification with Jonathan. There was a fight over the parents' estate. And then they'd been estranged as, I think maybe there'd been a little bit, like if someone was having a wedding or a graduation or something like that, but it was not a good relationship.
That was me. When did your father, Rod Mitchell, die?
March 19th of 2023.
In terms of your relationship with Carol Mitchell, how significant of an event was this?
It was major.
Carol Mitchell has made the claim that on the day after your father's death, you and your aunt, Nancy Lund, and Cindy Markey came over to her house and stole paperwork, such as handwritten requests of Rod Mitchell related to his inheritance. Did that happen?
No. So there's a week in the legislature called deadlines. And anything that got worked on that year that doesn't get a hearing is dead. Anything you're carrying for a constituent. I was carrying a lot of work that year. I was carrying actually all the veterans budget stuff. Plus, then you have to be on committees to see hear other people's work. That's why I was so upset that I couldn't get away that week to be there and help, because if I would have left, all that work for other people would have fallen apart. And both Dad and Carol Mitchell had been really proud of my work, and they wouldn't have wanted it to drop just because of that. So I really had to juggle my schedule just to get there Friday for the funeral, and drive up that morning, and I was still kind of on call to possibly have to Zoom and vote and drive right back. So I'm literally on videotape in committees at the Senate that day. There's no way I was there.
Not counting Rod Mitchell's funeral, when is the next time after the funeral that you saw Carol Mitchell?
A few weeks later, I drove up with my kids for Easter. I think it was April 9th that year.
Was Carol also at the Mitchell Easter holiday?
Yes.
Did you see Carol Mitchell inside her house during that visit?
I think we might have gone in for a second. So my aunt Cindy Markey, we all were, but had been concerned about Carol driving up and had her husband Butch get her. And so when we were all leaving, I was then leaving to go back to the cities. And so for me, it was a much shorter trip than for Butch to do the round trip, and I offered to drop her off. But I think I still had all three kids at the time, including the baby. It was 1.5. But, so I think one of the kids might have run in to use the bathroom, but we had to get back and they had school the next day, so.
In her interactions with the police, Carol Mitchell mentions many times a metal or a tin box where she kept financial or legal documents. Do you know anything about this box?
I do not. I've heard it talked about. Same thing with the notebook that came up. I have never seen any of those things, and to me, a tin box is like a Christmas tin, so I can't even quite picture it in my head.
How did Carol Mitchell act toward you regarding the topic of money?
Yeah, so we thought Dad had a will. I'd even asked him questions, and he'd given me answers like he had a will, and he did not have a will. And so I was really grateful after he passed that Carol was at least taking that step. And she'd been very clear that she planned to split it between me and Jonathan. She'd even asked for my social security number. And at that point, I kind of backed off wanting to help with anything. Plus, Nancy was helping, and Nancy's so smart with finances. But I knew if I was possibly going to be part of it, it would be a conflict of interest to be involved at all. So I didn't really do anything other than answer questions that she asked me sometimes. There was some money coming in from my aunt's estate that my aunt had passed very suddenly 2 years before of cancer. Yes. And she was diagnosed and passed so quickly, it was only 3 weeks. So she did her will the best she could, but it was kind of rushed. And so her intention had been clear that it was going to her siblings, and then they were to pass it down to the nieces and nephews. And because Dad hadn't properly marked things, and then there was a new chunk of money going into the estate, there was some discussion over that specific money, and Carol had asked me some questions, like, why am I getting money from Lori Sandry, my aunt? And I had answered them, and I always told her, it was ultimately her decision, and then I mostly tried to stay out of it.
Was that the Lori that Carol referenced in the text messages we saw yesterday?
Yeah, yes.
Let me ask you directly. Did you want to take Carol Mitchell's money after your father died?
No. In fact, I'd had a conversation with her a few months later once I was finally out of session. Then I started trying to visit every month to check in on her and make sure things were okay. And in one of those conversations, I said, Dad took care of you really well. Is there anything you haven't done that you'd like to do? Like a trip you'd like to go on? Anything else? But then at the same time, I had done the math, and I'd even called what I would consider like the best senior facility in my area at that time, found out about wait lists, found out about the costs for the different type of care. And once you go from like assisted living into memory care, that can easily be in a good facility $100,000 a year. And so I just knew we needed to like protect the money as long as possible, because her sister was in her upper 80s, and if that tracked, we could be talking, 10 or 15 years of me needing to make that money last. And I knew that if it came to it and there wasn't enough, I would be the one covering everything. So I just wanted to make sure it was protected.
I want to direct you back to your aunt, the money your Aunt Lori had given. Was it your understanding that that money was meant to go to you?
Sorry. It was Lori's wishes, yes, that it would pass along, like basically the Mitchell family line, but it was not, her will didn't properly contemplate checks going out while someone else died and how that would pass. And so it was going into my father's estate.
Who ended up with that money?
Carol kept it.
So you let it go.
I did.
You testified earlier that your father died without a will, and so there was a probate. And was there a beneficiary designated?
I don't know that the proper word is beneficiary.
Just like you, I didn't do any of those parts. I only did criminal law in law school. Tell me what was going on related to sorting out your dad's estate after he died.
So, because he died without a will, most of his estate was his retirement account from where he worked for, I think, his whole life. So that was the huge chunk of it. But there was money he had put in a CD from what was actually the first distribution from my aunt's estate that was $120,000. And then the new money that had come in from my aunt's estate, which was $50,000. And so almost all the money that actually ended up in probate was the money from my aunt. And in Minnesota, everything goes to the spouse up to a certain amount. I knew because of the amount, everything would go to Carol. If they have a child from a different family at a certain higher amount, then everything beyond that splits. So I knew everything was going to go to Carol because of that. She asked for herself to be named executor, which I had concerns with because she had no grasp of finances. Dad had done everything for 40 years, so she didn't have any foundation of finances. And then, she couldn't learn anything new because of the Alzheimer's. So I was concerned about her naming herself executor, but I knew at the end of the day, it wasn't going to meet the threshold, so everything was going to go to her.
And so again, just to put a fine point on it, despite your concerns, did you contest that she would be the person who would get the money?
No, not at all.
Or that she would be the executor?
So for the executor, so because I was the only child, I think they were required to put me on all the paperwork, only child of a different marriage. And so because of that, I could have asked to be the executor. And I thought about it because being the executor is mostly making sure all the final bills get paid, things like that, and then distributing it properly. But it seemed like Carol was already getting paranoid just by the fact that my name was on the court documents. And she was starting to think that I was challenging it and trying to get the money just because on the documents that would be sent out about the estate, it had to have my name on it. So I felt like if I put in to be executor, even just to make sure it got done correctly, that she would see that as threatening or something else.
Did we see texts about that yesterday?
So there was a text about me being greedy or something like that. And I hadn't seen her, it was a text from June. And I'd seen her a couple weeks before that, but when I did the timeline in my head, it would have been about when some of the paperwork came out for the first hearing on the estate. And every time paperwork would come out for the estate with my name put on it, she would get, a little spun up.
So let's return back to 2023, after your father's death, after the Easter visit. When's the next time that you see Carol Mitchell?
The first weekend in June, I think it was a Sunday, Monday, maybe the 4th and 5th of 2023.
Tell me about that visit.
It was nice. I mean, I was worried, but, so what I started doing is trying to visit every month. And, we'd stay at Nancy's, and she would come in for the day. And sometimes it was on the way there that we'd stop through, but usually it was on the way back. And then the next day on the way back, we'd stop and visit. And that's what we did. She came out to Nancy's for the day. We had a nice visit. There were a few things I was concerned about, like she dropped a lot of weight, kind of a scary amount of weight to me. And then we did the visit on the way home and had a nice talk for, I would say we were there for 1 to 2 hours. And then the kids and I went home.
After that visit, did you and Carol Mitchell text about how that visit went?
I believe so. I mean, we were texting. I had to go back through all the stuff for this case, and I had hundreds and hundreds of texts, and almost all of it before Dad was loving and cat memes and jokes and normal stuff. And same after Dad's, but then occasionally there'd be something paranoid.
I want to reorient you to these early
Sorry.
June. That's okay. Did you take screenshots of those text messages?
I believe so.
And did you provide those screenshots of those text messages to your attorneys?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits 220, 221, 222, and 223. And it's going to be up on the screen for both you and Mr. McDonald. I'll give you both a chance to read them one at a time and let Mr. Keller know when he can go to the next one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yes.
Okay?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Do you need a moment before I ask you these other questions? Okay. Is what you just saw a complete and accurate representation of your conversation with Carol Mitchell after your visit in June of 2023?
Yes.
Have the screenshots been altered in any way?
No.
Who are the communicators on the text message thread?
I am green and Carol Mitchell is gray.
How do you know that the person on the other end of the text messages is Carol Mitchell?
Because I've texted her under that name for forever.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer as exhibits 220, 221, 222, and 223, and request permission to publish.
Mr. McDonald.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Exhibits 220, 221, 222, and 223 are received, and you may publish.
As you saw yesterday with your aunt, whenever you're ready, we'll read each text message one at a time. I know you just said it, but for the jury's sake, please orient the colors of who is talking, and then Mr. Keller will move along as you read them.
I am green. The first one is in the morning on the way to Carol's house, leaving Nancy's now. She responded, smiley face. After we'd left, 6:04 p.m., Hope you made it home okay. I went for a walk about 45 minutes ago, and it was so humid I almost melted away. Ha! Thank you for the visit and sharing those wonderful boys with me. Very healing. I really appreciate it all. Hearts. I know you're hurting too, and I just want to remind you how much your dad loved you and the boys, and has always been so proud of you. Me too. But I know I had nothing to do with it. But still, I am proud of you too, and brag about you. Not only your career choices, but what a, this is the rest, but what a loving, wonderful mom you are. Me, of course you are a part of the person I became, and most importantly, you made Dad happy. Hearts. Thank you for the kind note. We had a nice visit too. The boys missed seeing Grandpa, but also you as much. We got home about 30 minutes ago. I got us unpacked and set up the new enclosure for our caterpillar friends. And I raise monarchs with the boys in the summers, so it's a picture of the caterpillars. And then I sent her a picture. We'd gone to Miguel's for lunch. Here is the picture from Miguel's.
You know, unpublish, Your Honor, please. I don't mean to do your job, Your Honor, but perhaps it would be a good time for a morning break right now. It's a bit of a break in our testimony.
All right. Ms. Mitchell, if you'd please step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we use this opportunity for our morning recess. I'll remind you not to talk about this case with anyone, including yourselves, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or listen to news about it on radio or television, social media, or on the internet. Do not talk about any of the people or any subject involved in the case with anyone. Do not share information about the case in writing, by email, by telephone, on the internet, or by any other means of communication. You must not email, blog, tweet, text, or post anything to Facebook, Twitter, X, or other social networking sites about this trial, and do not visit any chat rooms to discuss this case. Leave your notepads on your chairs upside down. We'll take a 20-minute recess. All rise for the jury, please.